Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Isabel's dream of a perfect family was shattered when Ethan, the father of her son Lucas, abandoned them after his birth. Determined to raise Lucas alone, Isabel rebuilt her life. But when Ethan returned, asking for forgiveness, an unexpected revelation turned everything upside down. Ethan had another daughter, Emma, a secret he had kept for years. Now Isabel must decide if she can trust him again and welcome Emma into their family. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, and keep up with our latest stories. Isabel had always dreamed of a family, a warm home filled with laughter, love, and the joyful chaos of children. Growing up, she had always felt the love of her parents, and she imagined that one day, she too would find someone to share that bond with. When she met Ethan, a successful and charismatic businessman, she thought her dream was finally coming true. He was kind, loving, and made her feel like she was the center of his world. They quickly fell in love, and before long, they were expecting a child. Isabel was overjoyed. She knew life with Ethan and their baby would be perfect, and that her long-cherished dreams of motherhood would soon be realized. But what Isabel didn't know, what she couldn't have foreseen, was that the dream she had built in her mind was not the reality that awaited her. The day she gave birth to their son, Lucas, was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The pain of labor was excruciating, but when she finally held her son in her arms, all of it melted away. He was perfect, his tiny hands, his little face, his bright eyes that looked up at her as if he knew she was his world. But as the joy of that moment filled her heart, Ethan was nowhere to be found. He had been present in the waiting room, but once their son was born, he disappeared. Hours passed, and Isabel, exhausted and overwhelmed, began to wonder what had happened to him. She asked the nurses, but no one had seen him. She called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic set in as she realized something was horribly wrong. That it wasn't until the next morning that she received a text message from Ethan. "I can't do this. I'm not ready to be a father. I'm sorry." Isabel stared at the words in disbelief. Her world, which had seemed so perfect just a day before, came crashing down around her. Ethan had left her. He had abandoned her and their newborn son without a second thought. Tears welled up in Isabel's eyes as she clutched her baby in her arms. She felt the weight of his absence, the betrayal, the loneliness. How could someone she had trusted so completely just walk away? She thought of their shared dreams, of their plans for a family, and now, in the blink of an eye, everything was shattered. But as the tears fell, Isabel's love for her son, Lucas, only grew stronger. She looked at his tiny face and realized that no matter what had happened, she would never leave him. She would never allow him to feel abandoned, the way she had been. She would be everything he needed, a mother, a protector, a provider. She spent the next few days in the hospital in a haze, trying to process the pain of Ethan's departure while caring for her newborn. But deep down she knew that she couldn't let this define her. She couldn't let Ethan's choice determine the course of her life or her son's. Isabel was stronger than that. When she was finally discharged from the hospital, she took Lucas home to their apartment. It was a quiet place, a cozy one-bedroom, but it was hers. It was their safe space, a place where she would raise her son with love and compassion, no matter the challenges ahead. But the challenges were many. She had no idea how to navigate motherhood alone. She had always envisioned doing this with Ethan by her side, but now she was on her own. She struggled with sleepless nights, the overwhelming demands of a newborn, and the financial pressures of providing for her son without Ethan's help. There were times when she would sit on the couch, Lucas asleep in her arms, and wonder how she would make it. She was scared and exhausted, but there was one thing she knew for sure: she would not give up. One day, as Isabel sat in the park with Lucas, feeling particularly drained, she was approached by an older woman who smiled warmly at her. "Isn't he a beautiful baby?" the woman asked, nodding toward Lucas, who was giggling in his stroller. Isabel smiled weakly. "Yes, he is. You look a little worn out, dear," the woman continued, her eyes filled with understanding. "It's not easy. I know. I raised 2 children on my own." Isabel looked up at the woman, her heart aching with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to talk to, someone who understood. The woman sat beside her, and for the first time in weeks, Isabel felt like someone saw her. They spoke for hours, the woman offering words of encouragement, telling Isabel that she was stronger than she realized, that motherhood was a journey filled with both hardship and beauty. "You're doing an amazing job," the woman said, her voice gentle. "Your son is lucky to have you." That afternoon, Isabel felt a shift in her heart. She had been so focused on the pain and the loss that she hadn't fully recognized the incredible gift she had been given. She had Lucas, her beautiful, strong, and healthy son, and no matter what, she would make sure he knew how deeply loved he was. As the weeks went by, Isabel found herself slowly rebuilding her life. She found support in unexpected places, kind neighbors who offered to watch Lucas for a few hours, friends who sent meals, and even strangers who reached out to her with encouraging words. Slowly, she began to feel a sense of community, of belonging. Evening, after putting Lucas to bed, Isabel sat on the couch with a cup of tea. She reflected on how far she had come. The pain of Ethan's abandonment was still there, but it no longer had the power to define her. She had become stronger than she ever thought possible, and she had done it for Lucas. He was her reason for everything, and with each passing day she realized that she didn't need anyone else to complete her. She was enough, and Lucas was enough. But the real turning point came one afternoon when she received an unexpected phone call. It was from Ethan. He sounded frantic, desperate. "Isabel, please, I made a huge mistake. I want to be a part of Lucas's life. I'm sorry for leaving. I was scared. Please, just give me a chance to make things right." Isabel felt a surge of emotion, anger, sadness, but most of all, confusion. She wanted to scream, to ask him how he could leave her when she needed him most. But instead, she took a deep breath and replied calmly, "Ethan, I don't know what you want from me, but you have to understand that I've moved on. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for Lucas. If you want to be a part of his life, you'll have to prove it." The line went quiet for a moment, and then Ethan spoke, his voice filled with regret. "I will, I promise. Just, let me show you." Isabel didn't know if she could ever fully forgive Ethan, but she realized that Lucas deserved a chance to know his father. She wasn't doing this for Ethan. She was doing it for Lucas, for his future, for his happiness. And she knew that no matter what happened, she would always be there for him, no matter how complicated their lives became. In the months that followed, Ethan made efforts to be present, though Isabel never allowed him to take away the independence she had fought so hard to build. She was a mother first, and no one could take that away from her. Ethan showed up for Lucas's milestones, and slowly, Isabel allowed him back into their lives, but only on her terms. She had learned that kindness and compassion were not about letting people walk all over you, but about showing love even when it was hard. And as the years went by, Isabel's bond with Lucas grew even stronger. They were a family, a small, imperfect family, but one filled with more love, strength, and compassion than she ever could have imagined. The love she had for her son was fierce and unwavering, and no matter what happened, she knew that this was the greatest gift she could ever give him, the unwavering certainty that he was deeply loved and never alone. What Isabel had done next, after Ethan left her, was truly unbelievable. She had chosen love. She had chosen to rise above the pain, to become the best mother she could be, and to create a life of joy and possibility for Lucas. And in doing so, she had found a deeper, more resilient love than she ever thought possible. As the years passed, Isabel's life took on a rhythm, one that was shaped by the love she had for her son and the lessons she had learned through hardship. Raising Lucas on her own was not always easy. There were sleepless nights, tantrums, and moments of self-doubt, but there was always the quiet certainty that she was doing what was best for him. Lucas's laughter filled their small apartment with warmth, and the bond between them deepened with every passing day. When Lucas was old enough to start school, Isabel was filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. It was another milestone, another step away from the cocoon they had formed together. As she packed his little lunch every morning, Isabel marveled at the kind-hearted boy he was becoming. He was empathetic, thoughtful, and curious, traits that Isabel had cultivated in him with love and patience as he grew. But Lucas was also learning about the world around him. He began asking questions about his father. He wanted to know why Ethan wasn't around, why he didn't have the family he saw his classmates enjoying. Isabel's heart broke every time Lucas asked, but she knew that honesty, at least to an extent, was the best path forward. One afternoon, after school, Lucas came home holding a piece of paper in his hand. Isabel set down the dishes she was washing and knelt down in front of him. "Mum, I wrote something today," Lucas said, his eyes wide with excitement. Isabel smiled, wiping her hands on a towel. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I wrote about family, our family," he said, holding up the paper. "And I wrote that I think we're perfect. I don't need anyone else. You're everything to me." Isabel's heart swelled with emotion. Tears welled up in her eyes as she pulled Lucas into her arms. clutching him tightly. "Oh, Lucas, you are everything to me too." That moment reaffirmed everything Isabel had come to believe about motherhood and love. Despite all the pain, all the struggles, the sacrifices, she had created something beautiful and strong, loving family with just the two of them. As the years went on, Ethan remained a distant presence in their lives. He would visit occasionally, and though Isabel had agreed to let him take part in Lucas's life, she had learned to be cautious. She watched from a distance as he tried to redeem himself, but the scars of his abandonment were not easily forgotten. Still, for Lucas's sake, she allowed him some access to their son. She didn't want him to grow up without knowing the possibility of forgiveness. But Isabel's guard was always up. She would never let Ethan take away the happiness they had built together. Isabel had also grown in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her independence and resilience had become a guiding force in her life. She had learned to thrive, not just survive. She had pursued a career in photography, a passion she had always tucked away for someday. That someday had arrived, and now, every day, Isabel woke up with purpose. Her work allowed her to express herself creatively, and it also provided for Lucas, giving her a sense of fulfillment that transcended the struggles of single motherhood. One day, Isabel received a call from the local community center about a new project they were launching to support single mothers like herself. They wanted her to come and speak about her journey, how she had overcome the challenges of raising Lucas alone, how she had turned hardship into strength. At first, Isabel hesitated. She had never seen herself as a public speaker, but she realized this was her chance to give back, to inspire other women who might feel as lost and isolated as she once did. She accepted the invitation. The event was a turning point for Isabel. When she stood on the stage, speaking in front of a crowd of single mothers, she found her voice in a way she hadn't before. She talked about her pain, her loss, and her growth. But she also talked about love, how it could heal, transform, and empower. She spoke about the power of forgiveness, not just for others, but for oneself. And, most importantly, she talked about the love that had carried her through everything, the love she had for her son, the love she had learned to have for herself, and the love she knew would always be her anchor. After the speech, women came up to her with tears in their eyes, expressing how much her words had meant to them. Some shared their own stories of pain and triumph, and Isabel listened with a deep sense of empathy. It was then that she realized how far she had come. She was no longer the broken woman who had been abandoned by the man she loved. She was a woman who had reclaimed her life, her strength, and her happiness. And it wasn't just for herself, she had done it for Lucas, too. She had created a world for him where love wasn't conditional. It wasn't about who was or wasn't there. It was about what she could give him, what she could show him, and that love had shaped him into a compassionate, strong, and confident young man. Years later, Lucas graduated high school with honors, and as Isabel watched him walk across the stage to receive his diploma, her heart swelled with pride. He was everything she had hoped for and more. He was thoughtful, driven, and kind, qualities Isabel had worked so hard to nurture in him. She had done it. She had raised him alone, and they had built a life that was not defined by absence, but by presence. Lucas stood in front of her after the ceremony, his eyes full of admiration. "Mom," he said, pulling her into a tight hug, "I'm so proud of you. You've done more for me than I could ever thank you for. You're my hero." Isabel smiled through her tears, holding him close. "No, Lucas, you're my hero. You're the reason I've fought every day, and you're the reason I've never given up." That evening, as Isabel looked at the photos of Lucas's graduation, she realized that the love she had given him was the greatest gift she could ever offer. It wasn't just about raising him to be strong or successful. It was about raising him to be kind, compassionate, and resilient. And in doing that, she had given him the tools to create his own future, a future filled with the same love, kindness, and compassion that had carried her through the toughest times of her life. She had shown him that, no matter what, love was always the answer. It was the force that could heal even the deepest wounds, the power that could lift you when you were at your lowest. Isabel had loved her son with everything she had, and in return, Lucas had grown into a man who would pass that same love on to others. The journey had been hard, but it had also been the most beautiful, transformative experience of Isabel's life. And now, as she stood on the edge of a new chapter, she knew that no matter what life threw her way, she and Lucas would face it together, stronger than ever, and more unstoppable than they had ever been. The unbelievable part wasn't just the pain she had endured, it was the strength she had found, the life she had built, and the love that had carried them through it all. Isabel's world had completely shattered the moment she gave birth to Lucas. And Ethan, the man she thought she would spend her life with, walked out the door. His message, brief and cold, had cut her to the core. "I'm not ready to be a father. I'm sorry." That was all. After everything they had been through, after everything they had planned together, he was gone. In those first weeks, Isabel was consumed with sadness and confusion. How could someone who had promised to love her and their child abandon them so easily? The pain was overwhelming, but deep inside, she knew she had to fight for her son. Lucas was her world now, and she was determined to raise him in a home filled with love, no matter the struggles ahead. The days that followed were tough. Isabel had no support system. Her family lived far away, and the few friends she had were busy with their own lives. She had no idea how she would make ends meet or how she would raise a child alone, but she found strength in the quiet moments with Lucas. His little hand wrapped around her finger, his coos, and his sleepy smiles filled her heart with a love so deep it pushed her to keep going. But the real twist in her story came when she learned a horrifying truth about Ethan, something she never could have imagined. One evening, after Lucas had fallen asleep, Isabel found an old letter from Ethan buried in a pile of his things. It was from a year before their son was born. She hadn't read it at first, but something told her now was the time. She unfolded it carefully, her hands shaking as she began to read. The letter was addressed to Ethan from a woman named Janet. It wasn't long, just a few lines, but it was enough to send Isabel's world into a tailspin. Janet was pregnant, she was having Ethan's child, and they were planning to move away together to start a family of their own. Isabel sat frozen, the letter slipping from her hands. How could Ethan have kept this secret? Why had he gone on with their plans, promising a future together, when he had been involved with another woman the entire time? Isabel's heart sank, the betrayal deeper than anything she could have imagined. Anger burned through her, but it wasn't anger toward Janet, it was toward Ethan. The man she had loved had deceived her in the worst way possible. He hadn't just abandoned her after their son was born, he had been planning his escape long before, leaving her in the dark, thinking she was the one he had chosen. But rather than wallowing in the fury that threatened to consume her, Isabel made a decision. She wouldn't let this new knowledge drag her down. Ethan's choices were his own, but Lucas was hers. Isabel had to focus on building a life for him, a life of honesty, love, and security. That was the path she had chosen, one that led toward the future, not the past. Despite the shock, Isabel continued to move forward. She found solace in her photography, a hobby she had always loved, and began to share her work at local galleries. She started teaching art classes for children at a community center, and over time, her life began to feel meaningful again. Slowly, she built a support system with the women she met through her work. They became her chosen family, lifting her up when she was at her lowest, offering advice and care, and providing the kind of love that had been lacking in her life. One day, 2 years after Ethan's departure, Isabel received an unexpected visit from him. He was standing at her door, a nervous expression on his face. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice shaky. "Can I come in?" Isabel was taken aback. She hadn't seen or heard from Ethan in all this time, and his sudden reappearance threw her off balance. She didn't want to see him, didn't want to hear his explanations, but something inside her told her to listen, for herself, for Lucas. "Why now?" Isabel asked, her voice cold, though her heart was racing. "After everything, why come back?" Ethan hesitated, then sat down on the doorstep, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I've made so many mistakes, Isabel. I know I can never undo the hurt I caused, but I want to try. I know I've missed so much of Lucas's life, but I want to be part of it now. I've changed. I'm not the same man who walked out on you." Isabel stood silent for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. She had heard this before, the empty promises of change, of redemption. She had seen him walk away before, and she wasn't sure she could ever trust him again. Still, she felt a flicker of something deep inside, something that made her feel conflicted. She wasn't sure what he wanted from her, but Lucas deserved the truth. "You have no right to just come back into our lives like this," Isabel finally said, her voice steady but filled with pain. "You've hurt me, and you've hurt him. Lucas doesn't need your apologies. He needs love. He needs stability, and that's what I've given him. I've built this life for him." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes filled with genuine regret. I know, I can't expect forgiveness right away, but I've been working on myself. I'm in therapy. I've made changes. I want to help Isabel. I want to be a father to Lucas. I want to make it right." Isabel felt a deep ache in her chest as she looked at him. She wanted to believe that people could change, but the fear of letting him back into their lives of exposing Lucas to the possibility of more heartbreak was overwhelming. She could see the sincerity in Ethan's eyes. But could she trust him? Could she risk everything they had built for the chance that he was truly different this time? A voice inside her whispered that it wasn't about Ethan, it was about Lucas. And Lucas deserved the chance to have a relationship with his father, even if Isabel couldn't quite forgive him yet. "I'm not sure I can forgive you, Ethan," she said softly. "But I'll consider what's best for Lucas. If you want to be a part of his life, you have to prove it, and you have to prove it every day." Ethan nodded, a quiet promise in his eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll prove it to you." The next few months were a test of patience and resolve. Ethan began visiting Lucas regularly. He showed up to birthday parties, to school events, and even spent time with Lucas one-on-one. Isabel watched cautiously from the sidelines, unsure of how this would play out, but she allowed Lucas to form his own opinions of his father. To Isabel's surprise, Lucas embraced Ethan's presence. He was excited to see him, to play games with him, and slowly, he began to understand that people were imperfect but still capable of love. Ethan wasn't perfect, but he was trying. He was showing up, and that mattered. Eventually, Isabel realized that it wasn't about forgiving Ethan for her own sake, it was about giving him a chance to show up for Lucas. She began to soften, allowing Ethan into their lives more. But she was careful, always protecting Lucas from the disappointment she knew could come at any moment. The real turning point came one evening, years after Ethan's return. Lucas, now a young teenager, was sitting at the dinner table with Isabel and Ethan. As they ate, Lucas turned to Isabel with a smile. "You know, Mum, I've been thinking," he said. "I think we're doing okay. I think we're a real family." Isabel's heart swelled as she looked at her son. In that moment, she realized that no matter what had happened in the past, they had survived. They had overcome betrayal and heartbreak, and together, they had built something beautiful, a family. And as for Ethan, while Isabel couldn't fully erase the past, she could see that, in this moment, they had all found their way. They had built a foundation of trust, of forgiveness, and above all, of love. The road had been long and filled with obstacles, but it had led them to a place where healing was possible, and for the first time in years, Isabel allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, everything they had been through had led them to a new beginning. Isabel's world had been perfect until the moment her baby, Lucas, was born. In the days leading up to the birth, everything had seemed aligned, the shared dreams, the plans for their future as a family. Ethan had been there by her side every step of the way, or so it had seemed. But when the time came for Isabel to welcome their son into the world, Ethan disappeared, leaving her alone in the hospital room. The message he sent was as cold as the marble floors beneath her feet. "I'm not ready to be a father. I'm sorry." Isabel, despite the immense pain, refused to let her heart crumble in the face of Ethan's abandonment. She held Lucas close, wrapped in a fragile blanket, his tiny fingers clutching her hand as if he knew that from this moment forward, it would be just the two of them. No longer could she afford to be broken, not with the life that depended on her now. Days turned into weeks, and though Ethan was absent, Isabel thrived. Slowly, she began to rebuild herself physically, emotionally, and mentally. She poured everything she had into raising Lucas with love, tenderness, and strength. Every day was a reminder of her purpose, but it wasn't without its challenges. The long nights spent rocking her son to sleep, the moments when she would stare out the window with tears in her eyes, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. It was all part of the journey, but she was determined to show Lucas that despite the heartbreak, love would always be the guiding force in their lives. As time passed, Isabel began to find solace in her photography again. What had once been a hobby now became a small business, one that allowed her to express the deep emotions she'd kept bottled up for so long. But it was also an escape, a way to keep her mind occupied, a way to reclaim her sense of self. Soon her work became well known, and people in her community began to take notice. Isabel's confidence grew, and with it, the knowledge that she didn't need anyone to complete her. She had Lucas, and that was all that mattered. However, fate had a way of pulling the strings in ways she never expected. One late afternoon, after finishing a shoot for a local magazine, Isabel received an unexpected visitor. She had just returned home and was standing in her kitchen, preparing dinner for Lucas, when a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door, and there, standing on her porch, was Ethan. Her heart raced in her chest, the old wounds reopening with every breath. Her mind screamed at her to close the door, to turn away and never look back. He had abandoned her once. What right did he have to show up now? But there was something in his eyes, something raw and desperate, that made her hesitate. Ethan's face, once so confident and assured, now looked weary, regretful. His usually polished appearance was disheveled, his tie loosened, his shirt wrinkled as if he hadn't bothered to take care of himself since he left. "I need to talk to you," he said softly, his voice tinged with remorse. Isabel crossed, her arms over her chest, her breath shaky. "What do you want, Ethan?" He swallowed hard. "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I've been thinking about you, about us constantly since I left. I made a mistake, and I need you to know that it wasn't about you, Isabel, it was about me. I wasn't ready then. I'm not sure I am now, but I want to be. I want to try. Please just let me explain." She felt the weight of his words. The past came crashing down, the plans they had made, the love they had shared, the promises they had exchanged. But those were the same promises that had been shattered when he left her alone. She had spent so many nights dreaming of this moment, imagining him coming back, asking for forgiveness, begging for a second chance. But now that he was here, the pain, the hurt, was so much deeper than she ever anticipated. "Your explanations, Ethan," Isabel said, her voice steady but filled with the quiet fire of someone who had learned to stand on her own. "What you did to me, to Lucas, I can't just forget that. You don't get to come back and pretend it never happened. You can't just show up now that things are better." Ethan's face contorted with regret, but Isabel saw the sincerity in his eyes. For the first time, he seemed vulnerable, a far cry from the man she had known. "Please," he begged, his voice breaking. "I don't expect things to go back to normal, but I want to be here for Lucas. For both of you. I need to make this right." Isabel hesitated, her heart torn in two. She had carried so much hurt, so much bitterness for so long. Could she really let him back in, even for the sake of their son? But as she looked at him, something deep inside her began to shift. The anger, the frustration, the pain, it was all still there. But there was something else, too. The love they once shared, the passion they had, was still lingering between them like an untold story. It had been buried under layers of hurt, but she could feel it like a fire rekindling after years of ashes. Against her better judgment, Isabel stepped aside and motioned for Ethan to come in. The air between them was charged with tension, but also with something else, something that made her chest tighten and her pulse race. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered, her voice soft, "but I'm willing to try. For Lucas, I'm willing to try." Ethan nodded, a tear escaping down his cheek. "I'll do whatever it takes, Isabel, whatever it takes." As the days went on, Ethan began to prove that his intentions were real. He visited Lucas regularly, played with him, and started building the relationship he had once abandoned. He was patient, respectful, and understanding, never pushing Isabel too far, but always showing up when he said he would. His presence was a bittersweet reminder of everything that had been lost, but slowly, Isabel began to let him in again. One evening, as Lucas slept peacefully in his room, Isabel and Ethan sat on the couch in the living room, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. After a few moments, Ethan turned to her, his eyes dark with desire, but also filled with tenderness. "I've missed you," he murmured, his voice low and intimate. "I've missed us. I never should have left, and I'll never make that mistake again." Isabel's heart pounded in her chest. The chemistry between them was undeniable, the attraction that had once sparked into a passionate love now simmering beneath the surface. Despite the years, despite everything that had happened, Isabel could feel herself being drawn to him, pulled in by the warmth and intensity of his gaze. "You hurt me, Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I can't deny what I still feel for you." And with those words, everything that had been left unsaid hung in the air. Without another word, Ethan reached for her, his hands gentle but firm. As their lips met, the passion they had once shared came rushing back, desperate and alive. For the first time in a long time, Isabel allowed herself to surrender to the moment, to the man she had once loved with all her heart. Their kiss deepened, and Isabel felt the weight of the years of distance between them melting away. That moment she knew that what they had could never be perfect, that there was so much still left to repair. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't afraid to love him again, even with all the complications. She wasn't afraid to take a leap of faith for the man who had once broken her heart, but who now, in the quiet of the night, was trying to put the pieces back together. As they pulled apart, Ethan's forehead rested against hers. "I love you, Isabel," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I've never stopped loving you." "I love you too," Isabel whispered back, "but love isn't enough. We have a long way to go." And with that, they knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but together, with passion, love, and the lessons they had learned through pain. They would rebuild what had been broken, for Lucas, for themselves, and for the love they still shared. The love that, despite everything, had never truly faded away. The story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The weeks that followed were filled with a careful dance of rebuilding, of repairing the trust that had been shattered, and of rediscovering the love that had once burned so brightly. Isabel and Ethan's relationship, though tentative at first, began to transform into something deeper. There were moments of uncertainty, moments where the old wounds threatened to surface, but there were also moments of quiet joy, moments when they could see the possibility of a future where they could grow together, not apart. Ethan became more involved with Lucas. He took him to soccer practice, helped him with school projects, and showed up to all his little league games. It wasn't just the material things that mattered. It was the time and the effort he was putting into building a relationship with their son. Isabel watched these interactions, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and hope. She never could have imagined that one day she would be sitting on the sidelines, watching her two favorite people bond, but here they were, slowly repairing the pieces of their broken family. For Isabel, it wasn't just about Lucas, it was about her too. The passion they shared reignited as Ethan worked to prove that he was no longer the man who had left her. Their intimate moments were tender, filled with the kind of warmth and connection that had once come so naturally. But this time, there was something different, a quiet understanding that love was not just about the good moments, but about weathering the storms together and making it through stronger on the other side. One night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Isabel and Ethan sat together on the porch, the soft hum of crickets in the background. The stars above sparkled brightly, the same stars that had witnessed their promises and their heartbreak. Ethan reached for her hand, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles, the intimacy of the touch sending a spark of warmth through her. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I can never fully make up for what I did," he began, his voice full of sincerity. "But I need you to know that I am here now. I'm here for you, for Lucas, for us." Isabel looked up at him, her eyes soft but filled with quiet strength. She had heard him say these words before, but this time, there was a shift. There was no hesitation, no lingering doubt. She could see that he meant them. "I want to believe you, Ethan," she said, her voice steady. "I do, but trust is something you have to earn, and you've already proven so much just by showing up, by being here." Ethan's eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, Isabel saw not the man who had abandoned her, but the man who had grown, who was working tirelessly to right his wrongs. He leaned in closer, his lips just inches from hers. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," he whispered, his voice low and intimate. "I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that the man I am now is the man I've always wanted to be with you." Isabel took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had always wanted this. She had wanted the love, the family, the life she had dreamed of. But there had always been something missing, the trust, the security, the sense that they could withstand the storms together. And now, as she sat on that porch, with Ethan looking at her with vulnerability in his eyes, she realized that this wasn't just about love, it was about understanding, forgiveness, and second chances. She was ready to give him a chance, to give them both a chance, because love was not about perfection. It was about the willingness to try, to grow, to face the hard truths and still choose each other every day. Slowly, Isabel closed the distance between them and kissed him. It wasn't the passionate kiss of their early years. It was softer, more meaningful. It was a kiss filled with the understanding of how far they had come, of how much they had endured, and of the promise that they were willing to keep fighting for what mattered most. "I'm ready to try," she whispered, her forehead resting against his dot. Ethan smiled, his lips brushing against hers one more time. "Thank you." In the months that followed, things began to shift. Ethan's presence in their lives became more consistent. He was not just a visitor, not just the man who had once walked away. He was a partner, a father, someone who was there every day. Isabel found herself growing to trust him again, not just because of his words, but because of his actions. He was there for their family, in ways that mattered. He was present in a way he hadn't been before. Isabel, too, found herself changing. She had always thought that the love she wanted was perfect, flawless, and without pain. But the love she had now, the love that had been forged through struggle and perseverance, was deeper than anything she had ever imagined. It was a love that didn't ask for perfection, but accepted imperfection and found strength in it. It was a love that was real, raw, and unbreakable. One day, as Isabel was cleaning up the kitchen after dinner, Lucas came running into the room, a piece of paper clutched in his hand. His face was lit up with excitement, and his eyes were shining. "Mum, I made something for you," he said, grinning from ear to ear. Isabel smiled and bent down to his level. "What is it, sweetie?" Lucas handed her the paper, and Isabel gasped when she saw what it was. It was a family portrait. There, in the center, were Isabel and Lucas, with Ethan drawn beside them. The three of them were smiling, their arms around each other, standing in front of a house that was warm and welcoming, just like the one Isabel had always dreamed of. "I made our family," Lucas said, his eyes wide with pride. "I want us to be happy together, just like this." Isabel felt tears well up in her eyes. In that simple drawing, Lucas had captured everything she had wanted. The love, the togetherness, the bond they had formed, despite everything. It was a testament to their resilience, to their strength, and to their willingness to fight for each other. Ethan appeared in the doorway, seeing the picture in Isabel's hands. He smiled softly, his eyes full of emotion. "You did an amazing job, buddy," he said, kneeling beside Lucas. Isabel looked at the two of them, her heart swelling. There had been so much pain, so much heartache, but there was also so much love, and for the first time, Isabel felt that everything had come full circle. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: this was her family. And no matter what, they would face whatever came next, together. Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them, pulling them close, and Isabel leaned into him, feeling the warmth of their little family. She had once thought that love would come in a perfect package, that it would be easy and without struggle. But now she knew that love was not just in the joyful moments, it was in the difficult ones too. Love was in the moments of rebuilding, of forgiving, of growing together, and it was worth every bit of the journey. "I love you both," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I love you too," Ethan replied, holding her tighter. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Isabel knew that the love they had was real, undeniable, and unbreakable. Despite everything they had been through, they had found a way to start over, to build a life that was even more beautiful than she could have imagined. Together they were unstoppable. The story had been painful, but it was also filled with beauty, a journey of transformation, of healing, and of love. The journey of a family reborn. Isabel's life had been filled with both joy and pain, and now, after so much struggle, she finally felt like she was beginning to live again. Her family was whole once more, though not perfect, but as she looked at Ethan and Lucas, her heart was filled with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: peace. She had learned to trust again, to embrace the love that she had once been too afraid to hope for. The future looked bright, and every day was a gift. Ethan had proven that he was the man he said he would become, the father Lucas needed, and the partner Isabel had longed for. Lucas was thriving, a testament to the love and stability Isabel had fought so hard to create. Isabel had everything she wanted: a family, happiness, and a renewed sense of purpose. But life, as it often does, had another twist in store for her. One late afternoon, when Isabel was working in her studio, she received a phone call from a private number. It was a call she almost didn't answer, but something urged her to pick up. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but the tone was urgent. "Isabel," the voice said, a man's voice that seemed oddly familiar. "Yes," Isabel replied, her heart picking up speed. There was something about the voice that was both unsettling and familiar. "Who is this?" "It's me, Janet," the woman said. "Janet, the one Ethan was with before he left you. I need to speak with you. It's important." Isabel felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Janet, the woman Ethan had been involved with before everything fell apart. She hadn't heard from Janet in years, hadn't even thought about her. She remembered how the woman's name had haunted her, how much it had crushed her to find out that Ethan had been living a double life. But now, Janet was calling her, and there was a sense of urgency in her voice that Isabel couldn't ignore. "What's going on, Janet?" Isabel asked, her mind racing. "I need to tell you something," Janet said, her voice shaky. "Ethan, he doesn't know this, but I'm pregnant. I've been carrying his child all this time." Isabel felt her breath catch in her throat. Pregnant, Ethan had been with her, in their home, raising their son, but Janet's words were like a dagger to her heart. "Why are you telling me this now?" Isabel managed to ask, though she was struggling to keep her composure. Janet's voice softened, filled with emotion. "I didn't want to come between you and him. I didn't want to disrupt your family, but I need to tell you the truth. Ethan has a daughter, her name is Emma, and she's been living with me all this time. I thought it was best to keep her away from him, to protect her from the kind of man he used to be. But now I think it's time he knows. It's time she knows her father." The room spun around Isabel as she gripped the edge of the table. Her mind was racing, trying to process Janet's words. Ethan had a daughter. Isabel could hardly wrap her mind around it. The man she had given her heart to, the one who had returned to her and their son, had another child out there that he knew nothing about. Janet, Isabel said, her voice trembling. Why didn't you tell him? Why didn't you tell me? I couldn't, Janet answered, her voice broken. I was afraid of the past repeating itself. But now, I'm afraid for Emma. She's old enough now, and she deserves to know the truth. She deserves to know her father. A cold silence stretched between them, as Isabel tried to absorb the weight of what Janet had just said. The pain, the betrayal, it was all there again, in full force. Ethan had been a father to Lucas, but what had he been to Emma? What did this mean for their family? But as the silence lingered, Isabel knew there was no easy answer. She couldn't keep this from Ethan, not now. He needed to know the truth, and their family had to face it, no matter how painful it would be. Okay, Isabel said, taking a deep breath. I'll tell him, but you need to meet us. Together. If this is really true, then we all need to face this together. Janet agreed, and they arranged to meet in a few days. Isabel hung up the phone, her heart heavy. How could this be? How could Ethan have a daughter with another woman, and Isabel never knew? Days passed, and the meeting finally arrived. Isabel, Ethan, and Lucas sat in the living room, waiting for Janet to arrive. Ethan was unaware of the truth that was about to be revealed. Isabel sat across from him, her fingers tightly clasped together, heart pounding. When Janet arrived, she was alone, standing in the doorway hesitantly. She looked at Isabel first, then at Ethan, who had no idea what was about to unfold. Janet stepped into the room slowly, her eyes meeting Isabel's with quiet resolve. Ethan, Janet began, her voice steady but full of emotion. There's something I need to tell you. Something that's been hidden from you for a long time. Ethan looked at her, confused. Janet, what are you doing here? Why did you? Before he could finish his sentence, Janet spoke again, her words hanging in the air like a bomb ready to explode. I'm not just here to tell you about Emma, I'm here to tell you that she's your daughter, Janet said, her voice trembling as she looked directly at Ethan. She's been living with me all these years, and I couldn't keep her from you anymore. She's part of your life, Ethan. She deserves to know you. The room fell into stunned silence. Isabel looked at Ethan, his face ashen, his eyes wide with disbelief. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice cracking. What? What are you saying? I have a daughter. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me be a part of her life? I was afraid, Janet whispered. I didn't want her to go through what you and I went through. I didn't want to hurt her or you. I thought it was better this way. But I was wrong. She needs you. She needs to know you. Ethan was silent for a long moment. His gaze drifted to Isabel, who had been watching him carefully. The betrayal in her heart was impossible to ignore, but she could see the anguish. In Ethan's eyes, he was truly shaken. Isabel, Ethan finally said, his voice breaking. I had no idea. I didn't know about Emma. I didn't know. Tears welled in Isabel's eyes. How could he have not known? How could he not have told her? The truth had shattered the foundation of everything they had built, and Isabel was unsure where they went from here. But as she looked at Ethan, something inside her shifted. It wasn't about what he had done, it was about what they could do now. Emma was a part of their family, and despite the pain, Isabel knew that they could somehow make room for her. There was no going back. But perhaps, just perhaps, this could be the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with unexpected family, unspoken connections, and the hope of forgiveness. Ethan, Isabel said, her voice steady but filled with raw emotion. This is not easy. This is the hardest thing we've faced. But you need to make a choice. You need to be there for her, for both of them. And we need to figure out how to do this together. As a family, Ethan nodded, his face full of sorrow but also determination. I will do whatever it takes to be a father to Emma, to Lucas, to all of us. And as the three of them sat there, the unspoken truth finally out in the open, Isabel knew that their family would never be the same. But she also knew that love was unpredictable and powerful. The future was uncertain, but the one thing she had learned through it all was that love, no matter how complex or messy, could rebuild even the most broken parts of them, and together, they would find a way forward, stronger than ever before.